This video sponsored by NordVPN. Sign up today and keep busybodies out of your private online activity by clicking the link in the description and using code BestGuyEver for 73% off. And stay tuned at the end of the video for a special announcement. See you there, cowpokes. I recently rewatched Cowboy Bebop, and yep, it's still a masterpiece. Bang. But like with any great work of art, when you revisit it, different details can stand out and speak something new to you, or emphasize an aspect of it you hadn't previously put into focus. And so I wanted to talk about some of my observations from this most recent examination of the canon. Bebop may be one of, if not the most talked about anime of all time, with many videos discussing its ideas and themes, but those weren't by me and are therefore all worthless. So right here, let's blow this jam. Bebop is famously a story about an oddball group of people brought together from very different types of life circumstance, who are all profoundly lonely and in search of a place where they belong, who find their way onto the ship's bounty hunting team, which, for a time, gives them happiness and meaning as part of a new little family, until the time comes to move on to a new adventure, or their past catches up with them. It's an honest-to-God, mature anime about the very adult phenomenon of the inevitably bittersweet paths we take through life, filled with meetings and goodbyes, where you can lose parts of yourself along the way, or find something that makes you realize what you've been missing all along, as we all try to make it through this hard luck life at our own tempo. As somebody who grew up with the show, Bebop has long since been embedded into my views on life and what adulthood is. As I immersed myself back into this world, I felt that old familiar comfort just being with my surrogate space cowboy family that's like an old habit you've forgotten why you started. So there was one question I focused on as I watched. Why do I like them all so much? I kept that thought on my mind as I followed the crew's hijinks and saw how they reacted to the different situations they found themselves in. It got me thinking about how they compare to the closest thing to the show's antagonist, Vicious, and in particular the way he and Spike, coming from similar backgrounds, treat the world they live in so differently, the way it impacts the people around them, and how that leads us to feel about them in turn. Spoilers, by the way, for this 23-year-old show, but if you're watching this and haven't seen it, shame on you. Now, as everybody knows, all bounty hunters, or cowboys as they flatter themselves, are shameless, lying scum who gamble with their own lives and the lives of others as they engage in the questionable morality of their flesh trade. But in the space-spanning frontier of the late 21st century, the intersolar system police lacked the reach to patrol its every corner, which led to the establishment of the bounty system to outsource law and order to the enterprising gunslingers we know and love, as they did in the westward expansion of old. There's no bounty in a corpse, though. Can't put one of those on trial, so the hunters have some moral standards they are expected to adhere to. And it does make for thrilling work for self-starters with a more aggressive set of skills, and a live fast and die hard attitude, and a pursuit of justice for those not satisfied with the authorities. Even if the lifestyle's profit margins are slim to none, and it does attract a certain element of scum and villainy. The series begins with our boys Spike Spiegel and Jet Black, who have been scraping by as a tag team operation for a few years, as the absolute pinnacle of Sigma maleness. My man Spike has a saying. He hates kids, beasts, and women with bad attitudes. Dangerously based. And yet somehow over the course of the show, all of these things pile up on the ship. Sure, Ed, Ein, and Faye have utility to the team, but they're also a source of needless complexity in their lives and plenty of headaches. So it's fair to ask if they're more trouble than they're worth to keep around. So why do they do it? And do you think somebody like Vicious would do the same? First of all, let's take a look at that crew. Radical Edward tends to treat things like a game, primarily getting herself involved in things that look fun, but gets along well with everyone and whose hacking skills are a major asset to the team. Faye Valentine has a wide selfish streak and can be, let's call it abrasive. But once somebody proves worthy of her trust, she can't resist her instincts to help them. Jet may say tough-talking women like Faye are the softies, but the guy's really a big squish himself, especially when it comes to helping the innocent, as you'd expect from an ex-cop and the most justice-oriented of the bunch. And then there's Spike, a guy who prefers to go with the flow of life and isn't above picking a pocket or two, but who we often see risking life and limb to help people in need. And it's that sentiment that leads him and the rest of the crew into acting like heroes. And that's the thread that connects them. While each of the Bebop crew has baggage and reason to be jaded, the tough talk and uncaring attitudes they project as bounty hunters are belied by the actions they take, to go out of their way to do right by the people around them when they find themselves in a position to do so. They share a certain sentimentality, this unspoken respect for their fellow man that oozes into how they treat them and shapes the way the stories of the show play out. They shy away from acknowledging it in themselves, but they all recognize it and often point it out in each other to embarrass them. Sure, they bring a certain degree of destruction and chaos with their rough lifestyle, and definitely don't sweat the small stuff. But when the chips are down, you can count on them to do the right thing, even if they couldn't tell you why they do it beyond, it just seemed like the right thing to do. It's the kind of thing you see when the group has an opportunity to turn somebody into the cops and cash in on a bounty, but after hearing their story, come to the conclusion that if they went through with that, that'd be messed up, man, and instead apply their own kind of justice. Not exactly good for business, but it just feels like the right thing to do. They're nowhere near perfect, as with any real person, yet are still inspirational, and we feel a connection to them through our shared humanity, as they do to each other. In other stories of the future, technology or AI have often sanitized or streamlined life. But in this version of 2071, life remains gritty and troubled, but with the rugged character those imperfections bring, as we see reflected in our cast, and it's clear that human element is still the most important one. Like in the first episode, Asteroid Blues, where hungry man Spike pockets a bunch of food from the hot mamacita. But when she's nice enough to let him have one of the sandwiches he stole, naturally, he gives the rest back. She just showed she's good people after all. So if he didn't do right by her, that'd just be messed up, don't you think? Or Faye, who has her tendency to meddle when people need her help, like during Spike's battle in Pierrot Le Faux, or with her snap decision to help Julia in The Real Folk Blues. In both cases, someone needed her help and she was willing to risk her life to do it. Despite her youth, Ed also has her moments, like when she meets the lonely computer AI in Jamming with Edward, and downloads it onto her computer so it won't be alone anymore. And of course, there's the Honorable Jet, who follows his own code of ethics, like when he tracks down a hacker in Bohemian Rhapsody, whose decades-old plan went off, robbing many of their life savings. But there's no longer anyone to punish for it, as the man has long since gone senile. So all Jet asks for his trouble is that the old man be left alone to live out his last days in peace as Ed's favorite chess partner. The whole show is full of these examples. And sure, the gang gets mixed up in all kinds of schemes out of self-interest or on a whim, but on rewatching, I was surprised to see just how much the group does just because it seems like the right thing to do. One of my favorite examples within the crew we see in Speak Like a Child, when the gang gets a hold of a tape containing secrets of Faye's lost past. She agrees not to watch until she pays back the delivery fees, but like a bratty kid, just peeks anyway. It's typical Faye trying to pull one over on him, but watching this scene, I always thought there's no way guys as sharp as Jet and Spike didn't notice her. But once everyone sees what's on the tape, a message from young Faye to her future self from a lifetime ago, it's obvious this is just too important to keep from her. I'm typically with Jet, as no fan of liars or cheats, but even he recognizes this tape was meant for Faye to see, and that's something more important than a few woolongs between friends. We see her rewatching the tape alone in Hard Luck Woman, trying to recall her past, so clearly by that point, the issue has long since been put to bed. And sometimes this spirit of generosity goes beyond what seems necessary or even wise, like in Heavy Metal Queen when Spike guesses VT's real name, winning the cash pot, yet only takes a single bill out of the stack, leaving the rest to her now that they're friends. Or in Waltz for Venus, where Spike meets the likable thief Rocco and ends up with his extremely valuable merchandise, while he, tragically, ends up dead. Spike actually avoids revealing its full value to Jet or Faye so as not to tempt them with it, and instead uses it to fulfill Rocco's wish and get the operation to restore his sister's sight, settling any doubt about the kind of guy Spike really is. Because they all have a lot of incentive not to behave this way. The life of a bounty hunter is rough and not well paid considering the expenses it brings, not the least of which is risking their own lives. The crew is constantly broke, including times when they've got a limited selection of food, or none at all. You really feel the pinch hitting them at those times, and it makes you think of all the opportunities for profit they let slip away. But that just makes the crew seem all the more decent for resisting temptation. These guys aren't making long-term plans about securing their financial future. That's not why they got into the bounty hunting game. It's a dangerous, action-packed business where you do what you please, gamble with your life, and occasionally lay down some justice. It fits perfectly with Spike's philosophy of whatever happens, happens. To let the chips fall where they may without being worried about things like failure or death. It lets him react coolly to whatever life throws at him, with the rest of the crew not too different in their thinking, which makes habits like their constant cigarette smoking feel authentic, since their lifestyle means they aren't going to be too hung up on future consequences they probably won't live to see. That, honestly, is damn cool. But in that easygoing nature, there is that perpetual undercurrent of a human-centric philosophy that compels each of them to do right by the people around them, They can't just use people and toss away their lives if they haven't done something to deserve it, which is exactly where they differ from someone like Vicious. Considering all the mystery around him, ironically, Vicious is one of the most straightforward and even one-dimensional characters in the show, because there are no conflicts in his worldview. No kindness, no warmth, no mercy, only the pursuit of power. As a high-ranking member of the Red Dragon crime syndicate Spike once belonged to, Vicious serves their interests. But even in his very first appearance in Ballad of Fallen Angels, he's shown taking out one of their leaders, the man who was his and Spike's mentor, Mao Yenrai. Having deemed him toothless and unfit to lead, he shows no loyalty to anyone once they have no further use, and he won't hesitate to kill those who stand in his way. When you think about it, in a sense, this is a very natural way for Vicious to behave. For the decent-seeming guys we sometimes see come out of them, like Mao and Spike, the syndicates they're involved with exist profiting off human misery and vice. We only see a fraction of their activities, but they're inspired by real-life organized crime groups like the Chinese Triads and Japanese Yakuza, who engage in the drug trade, as well as gambling, fraud, extortion, prostitution, and human trafficking, and aren't afraid to use violence to protect their interests. Operating in that world has a tendency to devalue human life, especially when it isn't profiting you, with Vicious simply taking the philosophy all the way, seeing no value or meaning in anything outside of the accumulation of power and status, whatever it takes to get it.
Everybody involved knows the stakes, and if you're going to accept those stakes, you got to do certain things. It's business. We're soldiers.
Even ideas like honor and loyalty that his fellow syndicate members and allies respect mean nothing to Vicious, as we see in him toppling the Red Dragon leadership. In his mind, taking his rightful place as the only one with the will to face the harsh realities necessary to lead. This is crystallized in the case of Gren, once a comrade of Vicious during the Titan War who looked up to him and was deeply moved by his gift of a music box. But even that kindness turned out to be just another lie and betrayal. When confronted about how he could do this to him, Vicious sums up his whole worldview by saying, "There is nothing to believe in. There is no need to believe." Followed by another cruel irony as the principled man Lin dies for the honor of the syndicate protecting Vicious, who betrays that very organization. There were some subtle glimmers of happiness looking back at the mysterious relationship between Vicious, Spike, and Julia. It appears that Julia was with Vicious first, but it doesn't seem like a stretch to think he may not have had the purest love for her, compared to what she found in the warm-hearted Spike. But that affair was behind Vicious's back, and catching them in it would have only further blackened his outlook on life. One thing is clear. After this betrayal, we never see anything except cruelty and lust for power from Vicious. There's a certain outlook on life shared by several of the key characters in Cowboy Bebop, that life is just a dream. In the case of Spike, this manifests in his detached and laid-back attitude. For Vicious, it's the view that nothing matters except power. But there's also another character who thinks this way. Vincent, the antagonist of Cowboy Bebop the movie, knocking on heaven's door. Vincent's narrative takes the idea of living in a dream to the extreme, as another test subject used in the Titan War like Gren, but in his case, losing his memory and being given visions of haunting golden butterflies, both robbing him of his past and making his experience of the present seem, in a word, dreamlike. He has no reality left to cling on to, turning him into a detached psychopath wanting to escape the nightmare and destroy the world. Vincent, Spike, and Vicious share parts of this outlook, but they don't all treat life the same way, with only Vincent and Vicious arriving at a dark, cynical view of life. So what is it that makes Spike act so differently from them? It's his underlying connection with his fellow man. Whether he admits it or not, despite his rough background, at some point in his life, he developed a respect for humanity, and it shows. As to where it came from, we can only guess, since we know almost nothing about his early life. Spike is well known for his serious kung fu, so perhaps, as he grew and became strong, whoever trained him might have also taught him the philosophy of the martial arts, about self-control, respect for others, and that with power comes responsibility. Maybe it was his mentor Mao who taught him the value of honor in the Red Dragons, or his old friend Annie giving him a job in her store. But at some point, he had a set of values ingrained into him. Even after what must have been a difficult upbringing, then loving and losing Julia, instead of becoming cynical like Vicious, something inside Spike, maybe that idea of a woman who truly loved him, compels him to treat the people he interacts with respect and decency, like an old habit he just can't shake. It's that instinctual groundedness, even inside a dream, that keeps him from becoming like his former friend. Vincent has that same kind of experience in a moment of clarity at his end, as the dream state he lives in momentarily receded, giving him back some of the connection to humanity he'd lost and allowing his nightmare to end. This sense of connection is why the montages in the movie are so fitting, showing little slices of everyday life, with the same people Spike and the crew interacted with and just saved the lives of, without stressing about getting a reward or even thanks, because risking their lives to save them is just what they had to do. These normal people are a big part of what the story is about. Vincent's loss of connection to them was the great tragedy of his life. But for Spike, even if it's pure instinct, he still acts to protect those people, and would for you and me too. And it's one of the reasons why we love him so much. Would a man who thinks nothing matters stop and play with kids when there's a bounty that could keep him eating meat for months on the line? I don't think so. Since he lost Julia, Spike has been drifting aimlessly. But in the finale of the show, when he finds and loses her for the last time and goes to confront Vicious, Vicious says Spike has finally woken up. The thing honorable Syndicate members like Shin had been waiting for, and is unable to turn away from this battle any longer. When I watched the show growing up, I didn't understand why Spike left the Bebop to go face Vicious and what he meant when he said, "I'm not going to die. I'm going to find out if I'm really alive." As he himself says, Julia is gone and there's nothing he can do for her now. So what would be the point? Now that I'm older, I understand. Like Faye says, Spike is a man stuck in the past, but we flawed, damaged humans each decide what matters in our own lives. We aren't algorithms blindly pursuing the optimal material outcome based on comfort, economics, or even self-preservation when there's something more important at stake. It's something he has to do alone, as he looks directly into his oncoming death that everyone can see. But it's his battle to fight and his life to give, and he doesn't want the people he cares about involved, even if he has to say goodbye to them, as we all must one day. Spike lost what he thinks of as his real life when he lost Julia and fled the Syndicate, becoming a cowboy and living in a dream world. But eventually he had to wake back up and finish what he started, because that's simply who he is and what a man like him has to do, no matter how stupid or wasteful or inefficient it might be, however some accountant might label it. He's a human being doing what he has to do, and that human element has always been what the show is about. These ideas are what make the final sign-off message from the movie, the last piece of Bebop canon, feel so powerful, asking, are you living in the real world? A question that's only become more relevant since the film released in 2001. Today, there are many forces trying to pull us into fake realities. The pleasure of escapism, information bubbles, virtual spaces, or outright meta-universes. And while such things can be useful tools for information sharing and connectivity, as long as we are the physical beings known as humans, they will never be a replacement for the kind of meaning and connections you can form with your fellow humans in real life. So as these alternate realities grow, take to heart Bebop's message of the centrality of the human experience. Live here, with us, in the real world, as Spike and the Bebop crew do, even as we advance into the future. Diluted experiences and even abstract concepts like justice and order are important and have their purpose, but it's only when they are actualized in the real world that they mean anything. Stories as well are meant to convey ideas, and it seems to me from the stories it tells to the background details of the world it depicts that that's the one Bebop wants us to remember. The heart, gravitas, and authenticity the series has earned over decades has earned it its place as one of anime's most beloved stories, and that ain't just nostalgia. It's a bona fide masterpiece, lovingly crafted by artists at the top of their game, full of human-centric stories and lessons that continue to grow in poignancy, that I'll happily return to again and again and share with people I care about, as some of the best work the medium and fiction in general has to offer. But what's that? There's something new? There's a live-action adaptation? Huh, I had no idea. Nor do I care, since unlike what fans produce, those official remakes never go well. And there's no way it's going to capture what I love about the original. I'm not interested, I simply will not watch it. And I recommend you do the same. Cosplay is fun and all, but I wouldn't want to get distracted by versions of the story that do not matter. And what do you know? It looks like the people agree. This is my Space Cowboy family, and I will accept no substitutes. The dream of everyone we love being happy together forever won't last, and that's what they call the real folk blues. But that's just how life goes. Take the good with the bad, treasure the time you've got, and care for the people around you, 'cause we're all gonna carry that weight. The reason people like me have such a deep attachment to a show like Cowboy Bebop is because, in addition to the timeless style and quality of the production, it also speaks to our inner humanity, depicting a cast of characters whose attitude toward life is cool, stylish, and devil-may-care, but supported by a deep love for their fellow man, no matter how much they try to talk tough. Faye could cheat you, Jet hassle you, Ed hack you, and Spike might borrow something without asking. But we know these guys. If you're worried about that, you're just sweating the small stuff. They're as flawed and bruised as any of us, but when it counts, you know they'll do the right thing. And the loneliness they all feel, along with suspicion and fear of betrayal, feelings we all deal with, are overcome by the hard-earned trust in a family like this that forms when people treat each other right in the ways that matter. They're the kind of cowboys we want out, busting the bad guys. They may be rough around the edges, and might even gamble with a few lives, but that's the Bebop life, Jack. And that's what it means to be a space cowboy. Easy come, easy go. Hey, thanks for watching this long overdue video I concocted as an excuse to gush about one of my favorite shows. If you enjoyed it, take a look around the channel, plenty more where that came from, including the new Gamer Zone episode, talking with my boys Giguk, the Masked Man, and Mello from Running Shine. And why not support my fine work here as the Best Guy Ever TM on Patreon or Subscribestar, where you can get access to my private Discord as well as the BGE monthly podcast, and get your name in the video credits like the jazz enthusiast cowpokes you see here. Don't forget to hit up NordVPN if you're in the market for one, as everyone should be, that product has served me well. Click the link in the description and sign up with the code BestGuyEver for 73% off a 2-year subscription, cause you know, something like that would sure be convenient for getting around, oh, I don't know, Netflix and its increasingly tight grip on the entertainment industry's throat. And as for the special announcement I promised, here it is. As you all know, I'm a devout lover of the series known as One Piece, but the show I did reviewing new chapters of the manga called the Pa D Cast has sadly been put to rest. I know, I feel it too. However, it is my pleasure to announce a new show about to begin that I call Talking Pirates! That will be a dedicated One Piece manga discussion stream show hosted on my Twitch page alongside my other streaming, and ported over somewhere here on YouTube. I may or may not have guests, but overall, I just want to get started and figure out the details later, since all I know is I'm excited to talk about One Piece again, which is basically my life partner at this point. The first episode of the show will be this Wednesday, December 15th at 4 p.m. EST, with a catch-up extravaganza, where we blast through discussion of all the chapters since we left off at the last Pod D. It may take an episode or two to get through them all, cause who mama, there's a lot of them. So I'll keep you posted about times and dates, but come on over and follow along at twitch.tv/definitelybestguyever. And keep an eye on my Twitter and this channel's community page for updates. Hope to see you there. Yo ho ho ho. And of course, thanks again for watching and supporting. I'll see ya on the flip side.